We finally made it to the final player preview heading into this 24-25 NBA season. We're almost to the preseason after what felt like a very long off season. But we do have this one final player preview to do, and it is, of course, about the Kings' 13th overall pick, Devin Carter. And I'm very excited for the Kings to add a guy like Devin Carter, but of course, we will have to wait to see him in action. We won't be able to see him in action at the start of the season because of his injury. I think they said we could see him around January of this season, which still leaves a little bit of time for him to get integrated into the team, but that is a bit rough, especially as a rookie coming in, not being able to play in training camp, having to come off this injury and surgery, having to come into a team that is in all likelihood going to be right in the middle of a playoff battle in January with no NBA experience. The one thing that he has going for him is he's an older rookie. He's a guy that people have pegged as kind of an NBA ready guy. And also he brings something that the Kings need, especially on the defensive end of the court. So, I think he'll get his chance. But we definitely have to kind of temper our expectations because of his injury. But I think in the long run, for future seasons, he's a very exciting piece for the Kings to be adding to this team. As always, if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing, liking, and commenting always helps. As always, shout out to Cody Willis and Joe Mama for supporting the channel and being members. And so let's get into the rest of this player preview. As I mentioned before, with Devin Carter possibly coming into the team in January, and we don't even really know if that's going to be the case. I mean, we've heard that this injury isn't one that's supposed to have any kind of long-term effects, which is good, but we don't know if he's going to come back in January. It could be later. We could not see him at all this season. But it's definitely going to be interesting if he does get healthy or around the middle of the season. It's like, how much do the Kings decide to plug him in? And it's also interesting to see how it affects maybe how the Kings operate around the trade deadline, because he's going to come back probably right before the trade deadline. And I think when you look at where the Kings roster is at, Devin Carter being a 6'3" guard, but that plays with a very big wingspan, plays bigger, plays kind of like a wing. That's something the Kings need. They need defenders on the perimeter. They need these long guys. Of course, it would always be nicer to have a guy that's a little taller, but with Devin Carter's wingspan, I think he slots in nicely to a position in the Kings rotation where he can come off the bench and be a defensive guy that we need. And so the question becomes, like, if he comes back in January and he plays well, then maybe the Kings feel like they don't need to make a trade for maybe a defensive wing player. Or maybe it's just too late and you can't rely on a rookie. And if the Kings are in the middle of a playoff race, they'll just try to, go out and get that help at the trade deadline elsewhere. And so that's kind of unfortunate, where if Devin Carter had started the season healthy, maybe we get to see more what he is and what he can be. And so that would affect how the Kings go about the trade deadline. But I still really like where Devin Carter can slide into this roster in the long term. When the Kings first picked him, I didn't know a lot about him just because, he's another guard. You see the Kings pick another guard. It's like, what are we doing? We already have lots of guards. But then you see, okay, he's a defensive guard. He can shoot the three. He can rebound the ball. He has a long wingspan. It began to make more sense. And also, especially with the addition of DeMar DeRozan, you have a hole at the shooting guard spot. We have Keon Ellis, and Keon Ellis is that type of player that can slot into our starting lineup and be a defensive 3-and-D guy. But it definitely can't hurt to have another guy like that, and maybe another guy that has maybe even a higher ceiling, because the immediate comparison for Devin Carter coming out of the draft was Derek White. I mean, that was something that Monte McNair mentioned. He mentioned Derek White when talking about Devin Carter. And you can see that in his game with the way he can kind of do everything well. He can handle the ball at times when needed. He can shoot the three. He's super athletic, can get to the rim, can play above the rim. He can block shots really well. He can rebound the ball. And so the Kings kind of in need of defense all around the court, but also especially inside. It's like, okay, we need some shot blocking, right? And so the logical solution to that is, okay, you go get a wing that can block shots, or you go get a big man like Khalil Ware. But instead, what the Kings did is just like, now let's just go get a guard that can block some shots. And while that may not be the perfect solution, it can definitely help the Kings defense. And I don't think in the NBA you necessarily need a center that can block shots or a four-man that can block shots in your team to be successful. And really what I think the Kings needed more of and still need more of is just versatile players. And so that's the slot that Devin Carter fills into. I mean, you look at the best example, which is the Boston Celtics. They're starting Drew Holiday and Derek White. You can't ask for better guards than that in terms of versatility, just being able to do everything. And so I feel like that's kind of what the Kings are searching for in a guy like Devin Carter, but then also a guy like Keon Ellis. And if you can have two of those guys, and I'm not saying they're going to become Drew Holiday and Derek White, but just those type of versatile guard players that can impact the game in so many ways. I mean, that's going to help everything the Kings need, especially on the defensive end, but also without hurting the offense. I think Devin Carter is the type of player that can kind of slot into any lineup. Looking at his college stats, he shot 37.7% from three last year at Providence. The season before that, he shot 30%. The season before that, he shot 26.7%. So the guy I'm going to compare him to is Colby Jones. In Colby's 3 years in college, starting from his first season, he shot 33.3%, 29%, and about 38% from three. So he also made that big leap after 2 seasons shooting poorly from three. And now we know Colby has really struggled to maintain that 3-point percentage. And Devin Carter's going to need to be able to shoot the three if he wants to become the starter on this team in the future. I think he can still be a bench player, even if he's not able to shoot the three like he was at Providence this last year. But I think if he wants to reach the heights that the Kings organization believes he can reach, he's going to have to continue that 3-point shooting. But the reason that I am more bullish on Devin Carter being able to continue his 3-point success in the NBA than a guy like Colby Jones was is one, the attempts. Colby was taking 3.3 attempts per game, and Devin Carter was taking 6.8. But then also, when you look through the tape, Devin Carter was pulling from anywhere. And he was pulling in the biggest of moments. He was shooting off the dribble. His shot looks way more fluid than Colby's. And so I just think he has a much better shot of continuing that 3-point success in the NBA. It's just so hard to not get excited about Devin Carter when you look at his film from this last season at Providence. Because like I said, he's bombing from way behind the 3-point line, hitting clutch threes. But then in the next highlight, he'll be getting way above the rim for a crazy dunk. And then the next highlight, he'll be chasing someone down for a big block. He scored 19.7 points per game, 3.6 assists, 8.7 rebounds, and shot 75% from the free throw line. Add in that like every draft expert that has talked about Devin Carter is grading this pick an A and saying that this is just an amazing pick for the Kings. I think within 2-3 years, Devin Carter is going to be the starting 2 guard on this team. And no, it didn't address the Kings' need for size on the front line, for a better power forward, for more wing play. It didn't address those things, but I think when you saw the way that the Kings had success at the end of last season on the defensive end, they did it without any wing depth. They did it without any shot blockers outside Alex Len playing 10 minutes per game. They did it by great defense on the perimeter. And I think that's what Devin Carter's going to bring. Fox is going to bring that. Keon's going to bring that. Keegan's going to bring that. And so I think you're adding versatility in the backcourt defensively to this team. And I think what's exciting about Devin Carter is you can also see massive offensive potential. I mean, this is just another Davion Mitchell. but I think a better Davion Mitchell. This front office so desperately wants a player like this to work out because they picked Davion ninth overall. It didn't work out because he just couldn't get anything going offensively. He didn't become the ball handler that the front office thought he could be. He didn't become the three-point shooter that they thought he could be, and he also was just exploited due to his size. Devin Carter is not going to be exploited due to his size. He has a massive wingspan. He's like 3 inches taller than Davion. He's very strong. And then I think you just see a better offensive player. And the Kings also went out and got Jordan McLaughlin, who's another Davion Mitchell type player. Like, the Kings front office just so desperately wants this type of player to work, but I think Devin Carter is the best shot at it because he doesn't have that obstacle of being a 6-foot player without a big wingspan. I think Monte McNair is just seeing that the NBA is going in a way where if you cannot play on both ends as a role player, you're just not really going to play much, especially in the playoffs. You have to bring something so incredibly special on one end to justify any playing time if you're not going to give it on the other end. Versatility is the name of the game. We saw how Harrison Barnes and Kevin Huerter at times throughout these last 2 seasons have been played off the court. And I think Monte McNair just doesn't want that anymore. He wants these versatile players behind Fox, DeMar, and Sabonis. I just get so fired up watching Devin Carter tape. He's just a fun player. Any player that's the type of athlete that Devin Carter is at his size is so fun to watch. I mean, just look at Malik Monk, who's maybe 6'2", and is an incredible athlete, and it's just highlight after highlight. I feel like you're looking at more of a defensive Malik Monk here in terms of that athleticism. Now, how much is he going to contribute this season? I mean, it's just so hard to say because, like I said, he could not even play this season at all because we don't know that much about his injury or the rehab. I'm not a doctor, right? But when you look at where the Kings were at last season, trying to plug Colby Jones into lineups late in the season, like that's how desperate the Kings were for depth after the Monk and Huerter injuries. That's where you can see that Devin Carter, if he comes back and gets healthy, there could be a spot for him, especially if there are injuries. And if there aren't injuries, he could still very well earn his spot in the rotation over a guy like Jordan McLaughlin or over a guy like Kevin Huerter if Huerter continues to struggle offensively like he did last season, or if that offense isn't just something we need and we need more defense. It would be a tough spot to put him in to ask him to contribute right away to a playoff team, but I think he's the type of player that can contribute right away in important moments. Anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report and for these preseason player profiles. We're only a few weeks away from the preseason opener on October 9th against the Warriors. Only a few weeks away from seeing DeMar DeRozan in a Sacramento Kings jersey. And also we got the new purple jerseys, which is exciting. Those look really nice. The City Edition ones that have been leaked don't look as nice, but you know, I always like to hold a little bit of judgment until we see them on the players. But still, the City Edition ones look a little bit questionable. But I love the way the purple ones look. I'm glad we got that full purple back. I'm sure I'll be coming with a few more videos in these coming weeks leading up to the preseason. And so I will see you guys then. Peace.